24 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 8:10 a.m. or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV. My name is Lecain. We bring you the most interesting news stories from around the world each week right here in the beautiful city of Makati. Thank you so much for joining us today here on the show. Now, today, of course, we will be talking about the very public breakup of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, a couple that we always knew would break up eventually, but OMG, it is really something. We'll also take a look at the breaking news that's going on in LA right now with the deployment of the military to crack down on immigration protests. Also, what about those Filipinos being deported to Libya? Also, Operation Spiderweb. That happened in the Ukraine, where they took out a Russian target deep in Russia. And is the measles spreading across the world? Jeez. But before we get to all that, there's something that came across my radar this week that I wanted to discuss with you. Okay. I thought I'd start out today to report that came out of a company called HelloSafe about countries that are the safest places in the world to travel to. Now, as you might imagine, the safest place on earth is in a cold country with fewer people because, well, you know, it's cold and there are fewer people. And that would be Iceland. With its northern lights and beautiful landscape, it scored an 18.23 on the safe meter. See, the lower score, the safer it is to travel there. Then came Singapore, which I thought was interesting. That would make them also the safest place in all of Asia. And then, as you can imagine, Europe, the safest continents with 30 countries in the top 50. But what stuck out in the list for me was the least safest country in the world to visit. It was the Philippines. Yes, in the past year, the Philippines was ranked at the bottom of the places that are the safest to go. And they are the top of the list of the least safest places to go. It was right along there with Colombia and Russia and Yemen, Somalia, Iran. But all of those places were ranked safer than the Philippines. Philippines was ranked the most unsafe place to travel in the world. Now, I know what you're saying. After all, we live here in the Philippines. Do you feel unsafe? Well, me, I've lived here for a while now. I feel pretty safe. So I was wondering, why would you think the Philippines is so unsafe for travelers? I mean, the Philippines has crime. No disputing that. So does every place on earth. Then I looked at the criteria for how they decide who is the most dangerous. And there's some things that I had not thought of. For instance, number one, which is 30 points, is the occurrence of natural disasters, the frequency of natural disasters such as earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, and, well, the risks of associated climate change, such as rising sea levels. Okay, I can understand that. We do have our share of earthquakes and floods. Well, if you live in Manila, you already know about floods. Number two, which are 20 points, violence in society. Now, as many of us as know, Filipinos are, for the most part, happy, laughing, singing people. They always seem to have a smile, even in diversity. But they also look at political instability within the society. The number of homicides, terrorist factions. I mean, okay, I get that. There are areas of terrorism in the South, and when is the Philippines not in political turmoil? Also, the ability to access firearms and the number of police to every 100,000 inhabitants. Then there's number 3, involvement in internal or external armed conflicts, worth 20 points. The category measures countries' engagement in armed conflicts, whether within or outside their borders, and assesses relations with neighboring countries. Now, it's true that the Philippines is in a constant conflict with China over the West Philippine Sea. I mean, it's true. But it's not really the Philippines' fault on that one. I mean, from my point of view anyway, China starts a lot of those conflicts. And on the internal armed conflicts, I guess Mindanao has its share of those to contend with. I personally never seen any of those conflicts, but I have not been to so many of those remote areas very much. I mean, do most tourists go there? Number 4, healthcare infrastructure. That's worth 20 points. This part analyzes the capacity of countries' healthcare systems, including hospital infrastructure, healthcare spending per capita, and the ability of medical personnel. Okay. The medical availability could use an upgrade here. I mean, there are, some okay hospitals here, but in the province, well, it's kind of touch and go down there. Anyway, number 5, militarization of a country. That's 10 points, which examines the degree of militarization of a country. Now, taking into account military spending, the presence of heavy and nuclear weapons, and participation in international peacekeeping missions. I'm not really sure how this applies to the Philippines. I mean, do we have nuclear weapons here to deal with? But okay, in any case, when I look at what's going on in the world, the different countries, it seems to me rather tough to put the Philippines as the most dangerous place to travel. I mean, compared to places like Honduras or Somalia. But when you look at the criteria they use, I guess it's possible. They also have a disclaimer. The index is not intended to reflect the tourist attractiveness of a country, but rather a global index of security and safety. Now, just for comparison, Forbes has the city of Manila at number 5 on its list of most risky cities for a tourist. When you look at the top 4 on that list, Caracas in Venezuela, Karachi in Pakistan, Uganda, Myanmar, Lagos in Nigeria. Seems odd to me to group Manila with those cities. I mean, I'm just saying, when you see those cities on TV, especially Caracas and Uganda, I mean, they're shooting in the streets. These are not what I think of when I'm thinking of tourist destinations. But in Manila, I just haven't seen that level of violence in Manila. Now, maybe I'm not looking that hard, but I walk around outside late at night here. Well, I've never really felt very unsafe. Now, I have seen some street food out there that seems like it might want to attack me, but that's from the inside. In any case, take it from a foreigner who's been here in the Philippines for a while, that if you visit here, I think you'll be just fine. This is the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV. Thanks for spending your hour with us. I am Eric Lecain. Has anyone ever watched pro wrestling? Now, when I was young, pro wrestling was real. All the fights, the drama, it was totally real. But of course now, after many reports and a few lawsuits, wrestling is now fake. It's known as sports entertainment. There are writers in a room somewhere putting together a script that all the wrestlers have to follow, who wins, who loses, and who slaps whose girlfriend, and who interferes in a match, who's not supposed to be there, and that person usually has a metal chair. But these days, it's not much wrestling I watch as much as it is U.S. politics. Now, in the U.S., the 2 most powerful men, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, have been in a hand-to-hand running the country. One is the president and one is super duper rich. 2 unlikely characters became best buds. One put up near $300 million US to get the other one elected to the presidency. Now, if you put up that kind of money, you expect a little something in return, right? So Elon, the guy who put up the $300 million, became the head of DOGE. That's the made-up government department that finds wasteful spending. I mean, that's what Elon thought he would be doing, but what Elon ended up with was a lot of bad press and the stock of his company Tesla speeding toward the bottom of a hated well. But it was okay because Elon was getting billions in government contracts and he was getting to be the co-president. The problem was that the writers in the back room, they eventually wrote Elon out of the show. See, Trump was happy to get Elon's money, but when it came time to share the spotlight, it was okay for a little while, but it's enough already for Trump. Now, Trump and Elon had a nice parting of the ways, a nice press conference where Trump gave Elon the key to during the conference, Trump let out that it wasn't really the key to anything. In fact, he gives those keys out to a lot of people. But in any case, they parted as good buddies. Trump even saying maybe Elon will come back one day. But as with every person that has ever worked with Trump in the White House, the loyalty that he requires is a one-way street. And Elon learned this the hard way, how things work with Trump once he no longer needs you. But before we get into that last week's events, let's take a quick look back at, how we got here in the first place. Now, before the election, Elon was saying that Trump should not run for office, that he was too old, that he would be 82 at the end of his term. That was too old to be head of a country or head of anything. Trump, as we might expect, called Elon a BS artist and bashed him in a rally for trying to buy Twitter. So Musk put his support behind Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Remember him? No? But after Musk bought Twitter, he said he would reinstate Trump's account there, talking about his right to free speech. You see, Trump had been banned for life from Twitter for not adhering to the company's policies of not spreading disinformation and inciting a deadly riot. And here's where things started to take a turn. Trump was indicted in 3 separate criminal cases, and Elon predicted that if he was arrested, that he could win the presidency. After that, Elon started putting out posts that were somewhat sympathetic to Trump. But as many of you have seen before, a situation when someone can't stand a politician, but then looks like they may win, so they quickly come up with a reason to switch sides. Also, Trump at the time was out of cash, not unlike when all his casinos went bankrupt. No one would give him any money. And here's where Elon recognized an opportunity. You see, there was a meeting that happened down in Florida between Trump and Musk. After that meeting, Musk started moving away from the possibility of supporting a Joe Biden presidency and maybe falling in with Trump. It was then that the cash from Musk started rolling in. Once that shooting incident where Trump took the edge of a bullet in the ear, Musk was all in. Musk put $45 million a month into the Trump campaign to make sure that Trump's campaign was flush with cash. It was then that we would see Elon appearing in Trump rallies, jumping up and down and screaming. Musk had put millions into getting Republicans to get out and vote for Trump. The strategy was to get those rural areas to vote for Trump, those people that hardly ever vote at all. The premise was that Trump and only Trump can bring down prices and make their lives better. This was costing Musk big time. But there was talk that if Trump won the election, that a deal was on the table for Musk to have a high-level advisory position. After Trump won the election, Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, another rich guy who loves himself, were tasked with running DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. But of course, Vivek quickly disappeared into the night, and as Trump said, a star was born. Elon Musk would be running the office to get rid of fraud and waste. After this, Elon and Donald were seen everywhere together in the Oval Office, cabinet meetings, rallies, watching rockets lift off. Even the time Trump bought a Tesla on the White House lawn, or Tesla, as he calls it. people started asking, who was really running the White House now? Elon was finally where he wanted to be, a South African running the most powerful country in the world, the U.S. The problem was that Musk is used to having people do everything he says, or you're fired. And, well, Trump is used to having people do everything he says, or you're fired. The things that Elon were doing were not popular with the American people, firing veterans, air traffic personnel, nuclear weapons monitors, also cutting aid to starving children, getting rid of life-saving medical programs. He was fast becoming the most hated person in America. Trump finally put a stop to it in March, to what Elon was doing, by saying that staffing and decisions would have to come only from department heads. Then, by May, Elon was formally out of the White House. But all seemed fine. He said he was stepping away to deal with his other companies, such as Tesla, which had lost nearly 50% of its market share. Also, Musk had promised to cut $2 trillion from the national budget in wasteful spending and fraud, but he didn't even come close. In the website where they show how much they cut from the budget, much of the $145 billion he said they cut was not real, or it was from programs already cut before he even got there. And the cuts that he made were things that were just plain mean and unpopular. In other words, his work was chalked up as a failure. So it was time for Musk to go. But I think that Elon thought that he should get more than just a key as a parting gift. Things like the mandate on buying electric vehicles, which would at least help him rebuild his company. But the new big, beautiful bill that Trump is pushing, it cut that mandate. And the bill is packed with huge, massive tax cuts for the richest 1% of Americans, those making over $1 million a year, and will add trillions to the national debt. This is basically the opposite of what Elon's purpose was in running Doge. So as Elon was walking out the door of the White House, he started to realize, like many other of Trump's partners, oh, wait a minute, I'm getting screwed. Elon posted, I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. To which Trump responded, Elon is upset because we took the EV mandate, which was a lot of money for electric vehicles. They're having a hard time, the electric vehicles, and they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidies. It was then that Elon said, what ingratitude, saying that Trump would have absolutely lost the election without his support. Now, Trump then said, well, he's not even thinking about Elon anymore. However, he did call 4 different news outlets to comment on Elon, saying, I'm not really thinking about Elon. Trump said, he's got a problem. Poor guy's got a problem. I won't be speaking to him for a while, I guess. In another news company, Trump said, you mean the man that's lost his mind? Then in yet another interview saying that Elon has totally lost it. And then the White House saying that Trump doesn't want the Tesla car anymore that he got from Elon. He wants to sell it. Meanwhile, Elon posted telling people to call your senator, call your congressman. Bankrupting America is not okay. Kill the bill. Posted a picture of that movie, Kill Bill. But then things turned kind of dark. Trump was in a press conference with the German chancellor when he started talking about Elon, saying the reason Elon is being like this is much like all the others that came before him, that Elon is now just sad because he misses the Oval Office. He said that he was very disappointed in Elon and that he had helped Elon a lot, and that when people leave the administration, they either embrace it or they become hostile. It's what he calls Trump derangement syndrome. He wanted and talked about the last moments that Elon was in the Oval Office with that obvious black eye. Trump said that he offered him a little bit of makeup, but Elon refused. But during that time when Trump was saying all this stuff, Elon tweeted something to take us even darker. First, he posted that Trump was lying about the bill. Trump said that he had to fire Elon because he was wearing thin. Musk replied that it was an obvious lie. So sad. But then Elon went a different direction, saying, time to drop the real big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. This is the real reason that they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. Now, we have talked about Mr. Epstein before, the famous pedophile who killed himself suspiciously while in custody. So Elon is now claiming that Trump was part of that. I mean, there are a lot of photos and videos of Trump and Epstein together, but those Epstein files have remained sealed even after his death. Now, just a side note, both Trump and Elon were both photographed together at a party with Ghislaine Maxwell, the person who is in jail now as an accomplice in the Epstein child ring scandal. But Trump wasted no time in suggesting that the U.S. could save billions by just terminating Elon's governmental contracts. That it was at this point that Elon suggested that Trump should be impeached. Then Steve Bannon, the guy who wants to be Elon in the Trump White House, said that Elon should be deported. Elon said that the U.S. can't use his rockets anymore, and that J.D. Vance should be elevated to the presidency. Really? Okay, now as far as impeachment goes, no one else has really suggested that yet. I mean, many officials have thought it, but Trump managed to get out of those impeachments, so no one has yet pushed that kind of thing yet. But you have to think, Elon has 200 million followers, and many of those really listen to him. Trump must know that if Congress flips to Democrats in 2026, he's in some serious trouble. Trump made a statement in an interview that if Elon starts funding those Democrats in 2026, there's going to be consequences. Now, Musk has said that he wants to start another party in the U.S., one that represents the 80% of Americans who are currently in the middle. Brings up memories of old 𝗪cie𝗿𝗀, doesn't it? I can't imagine Musk moving to the Democratic side, or the Democrats would even accept him. But these are strange times, or crazy times in the U.S. Yes, this is crazy and somewhat comical, but there's some very serious issues at play here. The big, beautiful bill that Elon is so mad about, it's not just gotten him mad. There are a lot of people in the U.S. that are not so thrilled about Trump's new bill. It's one of the largest transfers of wealth in the U.S. ever. It basically moves money from the poor to the wealthy. Massive cuts in Medicaid, food stamps, the health care and food of the poor, while having massive cuts to the taxes for the wealthiest people. Senator Joni Ernst was trying to explain these cuts happening to the poor at a town hall when someone yelled, "People are going to die." And she responded, "Well, we're all going to die, for heaven's sakes." And he took that statement as saying the Republicans don't care if the poor live or die, only that the rich get richer. Now, ironically, Elon doesn't like the bill because it doesn't make him richer. In fact, I think he joined the White House thinking that he will end up like Trump. The presidency has made Trump richer, much richer. But that's the thing we learned when Trump was in his first term. Trump gets richer from being in the White House, but only Trump. Elon mistakenly thought that he was going to be on that bandwagon. But instead, like the others before him, he was left with a tattered reputation which may never recover. This is when we have to guess. Was this all scripted? Or is any of it even real? Are the writers in the back room of the White House hard at work trying to figure out the next chapter of the Trump presidency? Maybe call it Life After Elon. Remember I said months ago that there would be a massive breakup between these two? Well, me and many, many, many others. And the story has played out just like we predicted. Now, we get to see if Elon will just fade away and become a regular on the Fox News political commentaries lists? Or will he actually do some of the things that he threatens to do? The difference between Elon and all the other Trump partners is that Elon loses $10 billion, $20 billion, $50 billion. He's still rich. So let's see who ends up slamming the other with a metal chair. And if it's the U.S., that really gets the beat down. And this is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio, bringing you the most interesting stories going on around the world. And next up, breaking news. Trump has made an executive order banning people from 12 countries from entering the U.S. Philippines is not one of those countries. As of current, we are still a friend of the U.S. But this is very reminiscent of the Muslim ban from Trump's first term, in which he tried and failed to ban people from predominantly Muslim countries from coming into the U.S. This current ban is countries including Afghanistan, Chad, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Myanmar, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. Also, there are restrictions on people from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. Trump said he must do this in order to protect the national security and national interest of the United States. This order will begin around 3 hours from now. Some of this new travel ban seems to stem from an attack on the Jewish community that happened in Colorado this past week, in which an Egyptian national took a homemade flamethrower and a bunch of Molotov cocktails and attacked Jewish people at a synagogue. Now, no one died in this attack, but several people were burned very badly. The man clearly was trying to kill Jewish people, saying, "Free Palestine," and "F you, Zionists. You're killing my people, so I kill you." As the man was shouting and shooting all these flames, he yelled, "You're a killer, you're a killer." He's been charged with multiple counts of attempted murder. But here's the thing. He was here in the U.S. on a B-2 visa, which had expired. So he had overstayed his visa. But here's the thing. People around him knew he was a danger. He'd been planning this attack for a while. Multiple people knew he was a bit unstable, looking for revenge. There's no evidence he was connected to any other groups, that he had any help. Basically, he was just a mad Egyptian, crazy person that knew how to make a flamethrower. He even said that he was planning this for a while, did not believe he would even survive. So this is one of the catalysts for Trump banning people from all these countries, even though the country the man is from is not on the list. He's from Egypt. Using this incident, Trump claimed that there are millions and millions of these illegals that should not be in our country because they are dangerous. He then made some comparison to Europeans having too many aliens. But there is much criticism coming from this latest ban. Many officials have come out to say that Trump's group at Homeland Security should have been able to catch this guy before this was committed. The problem is that currently they are only going after the easy people, the people that are just working and living, raising their families. The main criticism is that Homeland Security should go after the real criminals and not just focus on the people that are easy to catch. You know, there's people that haven't done anything wrong. And this has led to a big issue in Los Angeles this week. There's been many protests in Los Angeles because of the Department of Immigration doing these sweeps to arrest and deport illegal aliens. The issues being a lot of these immigrants don't have a criminal history and have been just working and living in LA, paying taxes and adding to the community. So Trump deployed 2,000 military troops to LA to deal with the protesters trying to block ICE from making these arrests. Seems to be kind of reminiscent of the George Floyd thing where, you know, he was killed by police officers. That happened in Minneapolis so many years ago. But when that happened, some of the governors refused the help by the military because, like in LAA, the presence of the military actually makes things worse. So the troops, the government ordered to go, they didn't go because the government didn't want them. But this time, the governor said, do not send troops to LA because they will just worsen the situation. Let the local police handle it. And Trump sent them anyway. Now, when the military or National Guard goes in as peacekeepers in a state, the governor is supposed to be the one directing them. However, in this case, Trump has federalized the National Guard so that he can direct them even if the governor is in opposition. Now, here's when things get a bit sticky, because in general, Trump is not allowed to do this. Military forces are not allowed to carry out civilian law enforcement duties against U.S. citizens. However, Trump can invoke the Insurrection Act, something from the 18th century. But in this case, he didn't. Instead, he decided to federalize the National Guard, something that legal people are still trying to figure out. I mean, this kind of issue has never come up before, so people don't know what's really legal and what's not. The president is sending in troops to help a state, but the state doesn't want them. Trump cited a law in which he can do this kind of thing, but only in 3 circumstances: when the U.S. is invaded or in danger of invasion, and when there is a rebellion or danger of rebellion against the authority of the U.S. government, or when the president is unable to execute the laws of the United States with the regular forces such as the police. So, Trump is really pushing number 3. Kind of makes the reason why it's different between what happened like 50 years ago in the southern part of the United States, when the president sent down the National Guard to protect the minorities down there. And then the people from the state, the governor of the state, didn't want them. But this is different. He's trying to arrest illegal aliens in a city that is deemed a sanctuary city, a place that welcomes immigrants to live without fear of arrest. Things get confusing because this is supposed to be a request by the state. So it's not immediately clear if the president can activate the National Guard troops without the order of the state's governor. Now, actually, this is the kind of thing that has happened before, previous presidents. How the governor has always approved the president's order because the president has had the public's interest in mind. Now, no one is sure what to do. The people of LA do not want the National Guard there. It's the U.S. state versus the U.S. president. In any case, the National Guard has deployed via the order of Trump. And what do you think happened? Well, that's what happened. ICE agents went into a clothing shop, a Home Depot, a donut shop, looking for immigrants without green cards. And there they met Americans protesting the removal of these people. Once these people were arrested, protesters and lawyers marched to the detention center chanting "ICE out of LA." Officers in riot gear with shields and batons standing shoulder to shoulder with those black helmets. And then the tear gas started flying. People yelling, "You are not welcome here," holding signs that said, "No human being is illegal." So, as per usual in these sort of things, stuff was then set on fire. The governor of California sent police out to try and maintain the public safety. All in all, they arrested 118 immigrants, and that's after they deployed 2,000 of the National Guard. The governor stated the decision to send National Guard to California was purposefully inflammatory, later saying all Trump did was make a bad situation worse. Trump, of course, decided to weigh in, saying that if the governor and the mayor of LA can't do their jobs, then the U.S. government will step in and solve the problem the way it should be solved. But this also leads to another story, which is closer to home. Trump administration has tried to deport Filipinos that were picked up by ICE to Libya. Libya? Why would they send Filipinos to Libya? I mean, isn't that country at war? What are they going to do with Filipino immigrants from the U.S.? Well, that's a good question. Remember, there are 2 factions in Libya, one recognized by the UN as the legitimate ruling government and one that is not. One in the West and one in the East. Now, from what I can understand, the legitimate government does not have any agreement with the U.S. to take any Filipinos. You know, the Trump administration will offer countries such as El Salvador money to take immigrants. Now, the question is, was the U.S. trying to make a deal with the non-legitimate government of Libya? In any case, a federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from expelling any Asian migrants to Libya. This came after an emergency appeal made by the would-be deportees' lawyers. The judge ruled that this would be in opposition of the order that you cannot deport detainees to a country that is not their country. Basically, if you send immigrants who do not speak the language and don't know any in that country, and that country's in the middle of a civil war, you would in turn put their lives in danger. You think? Meanwhile, remember that guy, 𝗪cie𝗍𝗀, the one that was sent to El Salvador by the Trump administration by mistake? He was put into a supermax prison, even though no charges had been made against him. And Trump made that massive mistake on national television saying 𝗪cie had MS-13s tattooed on his fingers when it was clearly just photoshopped on a picture. Well, he's back in the U.S. But 𝗪cie, who is legally in the country, has a full-time job with a child and a wife. His wife is an American citizen. Has now been accused of international human trafficking by the Trump administration. Now, this is something new. I mean, they never mentioned any of this before. So now that they were forced to admit to mistakenly deport him, the head of the DOJ said that they will prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law for human trafficking. What evidence do you have? Well, that is currently unclear. Now, the lawyer for 𝗪cie said that he is not going to be convicted of these crimes. First of all, the government violated the court order sending him to El Salvador in the first place, and then delayed the court order to return him. And now they are saying that returning him was not correct to their error, but they returned him to prosecute him. The lawyer said there's no way a jury is going to see the evidence and agree that this sheet metal worker is the leader of an international MS-13 smuggling conspiracy. By the way, did I tell you that they deported Gabi Lane, the most watched TikTok person in history? They got him at the Las Vegas airport, the UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. The guy who has 162 million followers on TikTok was detained. Immigration put him in a detention cell and then last week, and then they released him on the same day as he voluntarily just deported himself. So this is where we are on immigration right now in the U.S. It's kind of in the midst of chaos. Many live in fear, afraid to send their kids to school, afraid to go to work, go to church, afraid to go to their immigration hearings. So if you're planning a trip anytime soon, you might want to triple check all your documentation. That is, if you're going to the U.S. This is Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV. Did you see the drone strike that happened in the Ukraine? The one that they did on Russia this past week? Wow. Now, that was something I didn't see coming. Operation Spiderweb, like something out of a Tom Cruise movie. It was a drone attack that Ukraine has been secretly planning for the past 18 months, in which they were able to get drones deep into Russia, even as far away as Siberia, and strike at Russian massive bomber planes. I mean, it was really an operation right out of a movie. The trucks were moved secretly into Russia, and inside the top compartment in these trucks were drones, which were being launched right off the top of the trucks. Each container on each truck could hold around 36 drones. These drones could be operated remotely, most likely from somewhere over the border of the Ukraine. The containers, which were smuggled deep into Russia in what looked like to be wooden sheds, and in the beams of the sheds, there were these drones hidden, which could easily be sent airborne once the lids were removed. The video showed the trucks on the side of the highway with these wooden sheds on board, and you can see the drones just lifting off one by one, and no one was noticing anything. These small drones did a massive amount of damage. Supposedly they hit A-15 surveillance planes, the supersonic Tu-160 and the Tu-22 bombers, and the massive Tu-95 bombers, which are developed to carry the nuclear bombs that Russia has and launch those cruise missiles. In total, the Ukraine claimed to have taken out some $7 billion worth of airplane hardware from Russia. One of the air bases they attacked was 4,000 kilometers inside the Russian border. Now, Russia's defense ministry said that, yes, several of its aircraft had caught fire. However, no one was hurt. Several participants in the bombing have been caught. Of course, this is very hard to verify. It's Russia. However, the Ukraine government said that they hit 36% of the cruise missile carriers stationed at these air bases that they attacked. The way they verify this is the video taken from the drones. They said they sent 177 drones with 117 operators on the ground. President Zelensky said our people operated across several Russian regions in 3 different time zones, and the people who assisted us were withdrawn from Russian territory before the operation, and they are all very safe now. Now, what's interesting about all this is the fact that the Ukraine military filmed it all while it was happening, and it was spectacular. Like I said before, it was like a Tom Cruise movie. You see these drones swooping in, explosions happening on the planes. I mean, you can imagine Putin watching this, seeing the videos, the Ukraine drones. It took just before blowing up some of his most valuable planes. Don't you know that must have made him so mad? Well, you would be right. Putin was really mad, both because they blew up his planes, including the ones that delivered the nuclear bombs, but also because they filmed it and they posted it on YouTube for the world to see. Well, Putin was so mad that he fired a massive barrage of missiles and drones at the capital city of Kiev. Supposedly over 400 pieces of artillery were fired into the heart of the capital. It was part of a nationwide assault that ranks among the largest coordinated attacks in the 3 years of the full-scale war. This caused fires in multiple residential buildings and forcing the local metro trains to all shut down. A Ukrainian official said that they had shot down 30 of the cruise missiles and around 200 of the drones. Russia said it carried it out overnight attacks in response to the Ukrainian terrorist attacks, as they call them. It happened just a few days before, then saying the propaganda stuff about it being a battle for the future of Russia. The Kremlin spokesperson said, for us, it's an existential issue, an issue on our national interest, safety, on our future, and the future of our children, of our country. Now, Russia is calling it a terrorist act. However, they did destroy planes that were just used to shoot missiles. Donald Trump said what I thought he would say, that Operation Spiderweb was a big mistake, that all they did was anger Putin to the point of bombing the hell out of them. In the end of the barrage, 3 firefighters lost their lives and 20 others were hurt. Several residential buildings were severely damaged and 2,000 houses were without power. Russia said it was going to take revenge on Ukraine for the Operation Spiderweb and that it was pretty bad. Although supposedly not as bad as it could have been because, many of the Russian planes were destroyed in the Ukrainian attack earlier that week. Putin actually called Trump and told him he had no choice but to attack Ukraine. Trump told reporters that maybe it's better to just let Ukraine and Russia fight for a while and not pursue a peace plan right now. Right now, there's been no headway on any kind of peace plan. However, they have come to some agreements on returning captives and bodies. Ukraine continues to ask the international community to please pressure Russia to stop bombing residential areas. The Commissioner for Human Rights in the Ukraine said Russia is acting like a terrorist, symptomatically targeting civilian infrastructure. The world must respond clearly and take concrete steps, including condemning the aggressor's action. I mean, this is actually true. Russia is going after civilian targets, trying to break the spirit of the Ukrainians. But you have to admit, for any Ukrainian that maybe felt like giving up and possibly giving in to some of Russia's demands, and well, they've got a new breath of patriotism. When you watch some of the video coming from the Ukrainian drones as they delivered their payloads onto those giant planes of destruction, there had to be a feeling of pride that came over them. I mean, they are fighting a massive opponent 10 times their size that doesn't play by the rules, that doesn't target just military bases. And to watch them get bombed in their own backyard has got to have some kind of feeling of hope to the Ukrainians, don't you think? And besides all that, it was one of the most clever attacks I've ever seen in any modern war. This is Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV. We're talking about interesting stories going on around the world. I want to do a health update to a story I did last month involving the measles. We had been discussing an outbreak of the measles in the U.S. Now, I had thought that time the measles was gone. I mean, you don't really think about anyone really having the measles anymore, do you? But with these anti-vaccination movements going on in the U.S., it looks like maybe the measles is back. But the problem is right now that it looks like it's spreading more outside the U.S. Canada and Mexico are experiencing significant outbreaks of the measles. Canada has been alerted now that a newborn baby just recently died from the measles. It contracted the disease from its mother, who had not been vaccinated and was born with the disease. So far, 3 people have died in the U.S. and 4 in Mexico. Doctors are pointing out that the reason these people, mostly children, got the measles is because they did not get vaccinated. Now, this seems like very low numbers in the death category, but actually, the number of people who have contracted the measles is pretty darn high. In fact, the new numbers coming out of Mexico and Canada are the highest in decades. I mean, Mexico has 1,520 cases as of May, and those are just the reported cases. Canada, on the other hand, had thought that they had eliminated the measles back in 1998, but so far this year, there have been 2,755 cases. That's more than the past 27 years combined, most of which have been coming out of just Ontario. Now, the U.S. reported around 1,168 cases so far this year. The U.S. had thought that it had rid itself of the measles back in 2000, but for some reason, it's back again. But the interesting thing is that is the case in all 3 countries is that they are in areas where Mennonites live. Now, we have spoken about the Mennonites before on the show. In a nutshell, they are a Protestant group of Christians going back as far as the 16th century. They tend to live their lives in a time of the past, driving around in horse and carriage vehicles, living a very simple life in homes with no electricity, also living and marrying in communities of other Mennonites, very separate from the rest of the world and its cultures. And they mostly live in North America. They are not fond of modern medicine, such as surgery or vaccines. This is the one extreme similarity in all 3 concentrations of the disease in these 3 different countries. That the first outbreaks all started in Mennonite communities. They may have started there, however, they have now spread to the general public. Mexico has already issued a travel warning of people traveling to the U.S. and Canada, advising them to get vaccinated before heading there. This is especially directed at women who might be getting pregnant or who are already pregnant. Now, we originally thought that the measles in the U.S. was concentrated mostly in Texas and Oklahoma, maybe New Mexico, and that's where many Mennonite communities are. But as of now, there are cases in 33 states, all the way from New York, California, and Alaska, and Hawaii. And 95% of those cases reported are from unvaccinated people. Right now, the CDC is urging parents to give their children 2 doses of the MMR vaccine, one between 12 and 15 months, and one between 4 and 6 years old. Supposedly, if the child has 2 doses of the vaccine, that will give them a 97% chance of not getting the virus. Now, there is a new way of monitoring where the measles outbreak might be. And it has to do with COVID. It seems so long ago. We were able to track down the concentrations of COVID through testing wastewater. They would do testing in the sewage plants and see how much of the virus was being flushed down our old toilets. Well, the people from the company Wastewater Scan have a new process to detect the measles. In fact, they can almost tell you if you have the measles before you have any symptoms. Well, what they can do is they can tell what areas are about to have outbreaks and start preparing for it in those areas. You see, the measles is highly contagious. If you are not vaccinated and you walk into a room where the measles has been, you are likely to have an 85% chance of contacting the virus. Also, this process is very good for telling where measles is, especially if the people there will not tell you. Many cases of the measles go unreported. They know for sure that Texas, who reported 745 outbreaks associated cases, was way more. Experts know that the number is totally wrong. There are way more cases than people say there are. The problem with places with many cases like Texas, it's somewhat similar to COVID. What if a highly infected carrier in one of those places gets on a plane? What if they fly to another country? This is how COVID managed to jump around the world so quickly. It traveled on an airplane. Now, the good thing is most people are vaccinated from the measles. The problem is the current number of parents that are starting to believe in the conspiracy theories that vaccines will somehow harm their children is growing. The problem with that theory is that so many vaccines have been given out already, and nothing has really happened to people. Now, I know Robert Kennedy Jr., the head of the Health and Human Services in the Trump administration, continues to say that vaccines are not good for your child, but there is no concrete proof to support that. Part of the reason for the outbreak of measles in places like the U.S. may be the communities of the Mennonites, but the spread of it is caused by social media. A blast of misinformation about vaccines in recent years has scared people into believing that vaccines are going to harm your children or going to give them autism. Of course, the real problem with the disease that we all need to worry about, the airplane, someone from one of those areas, people that don't vaccinate themselves, getting on a plane and coming to a place like the Philippines. Between January 1st, March 15, 2025, 1,185 cases of the measles were reported in the Philippines. Now, the Philippines does not have the medical infrastructure of the U.S. Everyone in the U.S. has access to vaccines, but not everyone has access to them here in the Philippines. I'm just saying, here is the big problem. You have a country where people believe some misinformation that they read on Facebook, and the fallout is a child getting sick on the other side of the world. Misinformation just has so many levels. But this is the world we live in. Time doesn't necessarily make us more safer. And this is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. We're about out of time here. I'm so happy that you could join us this week in our discussion on news going on around the world. Please join us again next week for more World News Jam. And until then, everybody be safe out there, and we will see you next week.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.